Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fizza Jamal, bringing you our main stories in detail. Discussing the Afghan peace process in Beijing, the US, Pakistan, China and Russia have called for a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire in Afghanistan. This follows recent intra-Afghan talks and another round of negotiations between the US and Taliban in Qatar. In a joint statement after a meeting in Beijing, envoys of the four countries pushed for direct talks between the Afghan government and Taliban insurgents. They said the dialogue should be Afghan-led and lead to a peace framework as soon as possible. The four envoys emphasized the importance of their consensus on the Afghan peace process agreed in April. In Yemen, 10 Houthi rebels have been killed in a government assault on their bases in the central province of Al-Baida. 7 government soldiers were also killed amid intense fighting for control of the mountainous territory. Battles continue to rage in the region. And now moving on to Somalia, where 13 people, including 2 journalists, have been killed and 50 others wounded in a terrorist attack in southern part of it. Witnesses said gunmen stormed a hotel building near the port of Kismayo after detonating a car bomb at its entrance. Regional politicians were holding a meeting inside the hotel at that time. The terrorist group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the attack. This militant group has been fighting the Somali government for more than a decade now. And in Syria, 4 fighters from the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces have been killed in a suicide car bomb blast in the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor. War monitors said 6 other fighters were wounded in the attack targeting Kurdish forces. The suicide bomber detonated his explosive-laden vehicle at a military post manned by the SDF fighters in the town of Tayane. The UK-based watchdog blamed ISIS for the bomb explosion. Israeli forces have wounded 34 Palestinians during weekly protests along the Gaza border. Palestine's health ministry says Israeli troops fired live ammunition and rubber bullets at the protesters. The ministry says a 10-year-old child is in critical condition after being shot in the head. The demonstrations call for Israel to lift its blockade of the Gaza Strip. Officials say over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the start of weekly protests last year. In another development, police in Gibraltar say 4 crew members of a seized Iranian tanker have been released on bail without charge. The 4 Indian nationals were arrested earlier this week after their vessel was detained on suspicion of smuggling oil into Syria. Police said the crewmen were released unconditionally, but the tanker will remain in detention as investigation is still underway. Earlier, Gibraltar's Chief Minister Fabian Picardo claimed the vessel breached European Union sanctions on Syria. Britain's Royal Marine seized the ship last week, allegedly at the request of the US government. We move on to Africa, where in Sudan, a political transition agreement between the military and opposition is expected to be signed today. An African Union envoy says a joint sovereign council will rule the North African country for 3 years until elections are held. Earlier, the military said it thwarted another attempted coup launched to scuttle the power-sharing deal. State media said that 16 serving and retired military officers were arrested. The military and pro-democracy alliance agreed on a joint sovereign council last week to end the crisis, continuing since April. And now we move on to New Zealand, where citizens have handed in hundreds of prohibited weapons to police under the government's gun buyback scheme. The arrangement aims to rid the country of semi-automatic weapons in the wake of the terrorist attacks on the Christchurch mosques. More in this report.
Police said they paid about $200,000 to dozens of gun owners within hours of staging the first buyback event. It was held just a few kilometers away from the Christchurch mosques, where 51 Muslims were gunned down in March. The government said $208 million have been allocated for the scheme. Police officials said the first buyback event has been a huge success.
There was people queuing up at 8:30 this morning for a 10 o'clock opening. We opened early to facilitate the public coming in, and they've gone right through to past 3 o'clock today. So the engagement with the public, or from the firearms public in Canterbury, has been stunning.
258 such election events will be held across New Zealand over the next 3 years. New Zealand's parliament enacted gun reforms in April. The new law has banned the circulation and use of the most semi-automatic firearms and some shotguns.
The U.S. Immigration and Customs Department will launch raids from Sunday to round up illegal migrants for deportation. President Donald Trump says the authorities will focus on criminal elements. A number of mayors of different cities have refused to cooperate. The Supreme Court has already barred the Trump administration from adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census form. Hundreds of undocumented African migrants have stormed the Pantheon in Paris to demand the right to remain in France. The protesters demanded negotiations with Prime Minister Edouard Philippe over their immigration status. Police intervened and removed the peaceful protesters from the National Monument. The West African protesters called themselves Black Vests, a reference to the anti-government Yellow Vest movement. America's National Hurricane Center has warned millions of residents in Louisiana to brace for impact from Tropical Storm Barry. The southern U.S. state and its largest city of New Orleans are threatened with potentially disastrous rainfall and flooding. This report has more.
Officials forecast the storm will reach hurricane status and roar ashore along the state's central coast. Earlier, it packed winds of 65 miles per hour. Officials ramped up evacuations, airlines cancelled flights, and floodgates were slammed shut in preparation.
We have rescue, and our fire department's trained in rescue. A lot of our firemen have rescue certifications for rescue boats. We have, our sheriff's office has rescue boats. Katrina taught us a big lesson. Katrina taught us that we needed more high water vehicles. Our sheriff's office phased out Crown Victorias and all, for the most part, and now they're in Ford Explorers because they're higher.
More from bad weather. Floods and landslides triggered by torrential monsoon storms have killed 40 people across South Asia in just the last 2 days. The monsoon, which runs from June to September, causes widespread death and destruction every year. In Nepal, 27 people died after torrential rains hit the east and south of the country. 11 others have been killed in India's northeastern states of Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. Heavy rains in Bangladesh claimed 2 more lives, and authorities in Pakistan have also issued a flood alert for several cities as the monsoon began in the country. Last year's monsoon season caused the deaths of over 1,200 people across South Asia. And 25 people have been injured after a 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck the southern Philippines. Police officials said the tremor was felt at 4 neighboring towns in Mindanao, where it damaged homes and churches and other buildings. The Philippines is part of the so-called Ring of Fire in the Western Pacific, notorious for intense seismic activity. The southern Japanese island of Okinawa has also been hit by an earthquake recorded at 6.1 on the Richter scale. There are no immediate reports of damage or casualties. And now we'll take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back after the break. We'll continue on with our stories. Bolivian musical maestro Ernesto Cavor is making sound waves in the Andean nation with his unique musical inventions. He is best known for mashing up a charango guitar with the panpipe, but that is not his only invention, as we see in this report.
In a world where technology addiction runs rampant, traditional music has lost its importance. Bolivian Ernesto Cavor is one of the few keeping a rich tradition alive. Dubbed the world's best charango player, Cavor has turned the traditional stringed instrument on its head. He has also invented instruments like the muyu muyu and arpinola.
Tengo muchos.
I have many instruments that I have invented. As you have seen, the most important ones are the Miu Miu guitar, which represents the world. The zampona has 3 rows, 2 rows.
De 3 filas, de 2 filas.
The self-taught maestro discovered music in his teens when he enrolled in a dance class to overcome shyness. The dancing did not stick, but Cavor developed a passion for sound and the charango.
Being self-taught for me means learning by watching, listening and enjoying. That's what I did. A long time ago, I learned to play the guitar. That is my strength.
Más me gusta a mí inventar instrumentos.
Cavor's exhibition in La Paz is winning over a new generation of fans with its unique musical stylings.
And some of the world's most expensive salt is still collected by hand in a marshy corner of western France. The salt collecting technique has been passed down through the generations for over 1,000 years. This report has more.
Some people watch their dreams evaporate, but some make a living from evaporation. The French town of Guérande is making its money by evaporating seawater to make salt crystals. At least 380 salt farmers work in the fields with labor-intensive practices, which explains the high price tag.
The technique for managing the water is the same, used by the people who created the salt ponds. I'm proud that this craft is still alive.
The marshes are a popular tourist attraction, bringing in 80,000 visitors a year to watch the farmers work.
We're from around here, so we try to mostly buy local. It's the main reason, giving work to the local producers.
Farmers use traditional tools to get the salt, harvesting 2 tons of it a day. Each year, 2.5 million euros worth of Guérande salt is sold in 55 countries.
Let's take you to the world of business, where Wall Street stocks climbed to record highs this week over optimism that U.S. interest rates could be cut later this month. Major U.S. indices have gained 2.4% so far in July, adding to major gains in June. The broad-based S&P 500 closed above the 3,000 mark for the first time. For the week, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 1.5%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq added 1%. But European bourses closed flat as investors reacted negatively to new Chinese trade data and Eurozone industrial production figures. Oil prices also rose this week, with U.S. crude jumping 4.5%. And U.S. regulators have imposed a $5 billion fine on Facebook as part of a settlement over data privacy violations. It is the largest ever penalty levied on a tech giant by the Federal Trade Commission. The settlement was reached after an investigation found that Facebook stole the data of tens of millions of users. The fine represents approximately 9% of Facebook's revenue of 2018. The social media giant has agreed to improve and protect users' privacy in a result. Negotiations between the U.S. and Indian trade representatives in New Delhi have ended without any progress on a dispute over tariffs. Indian officials said discussions on key issues have been put off until Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal's visit to Washington for more talks next month. In a short statement, the Indian government said the two countries agreed to continue their discussions on differences ranging from tariffs to market access. Earlier, President Donald Trump said that the Indian tariffs on U.S. goods are unacceptable. And now let's see where it will rain, where it will be sunny this day. These are all for the main stories in detail we have for you this hour. You can also choose to keep tabs on us on all of our social media. Just find us by the name indus.news.